So you're interested in having a fence installed, but you've got a lot of choices. Nowadays, there are a plethora of fencing contractors in the market, whether we're talking about contractors that specialize in fence and have built it for an incredibly long time, or newer contractors that may specialize in something else but are recently adding fence to their business. Not saying one is better or worse than the other, but there are 5 questions you absolutely must have answered before choosing a contractor to make sure that your trust is being put in a company who won't wander off before the job's complete. The first question is going to be for references. I typically recommend you ask for 4 references of work that this contractor has personally installed. 2 of them I like for it to be recent, within the last 6 months, to get an idea for the current standards that they're holding themselves to, what the current work looks like. And then also I'm asking for 2 that are a year or more older. What is the work going to look like after it's had time to age? But also, what does the fence look like after it's been through a few seasons, a few cycles of freezing and thawing? As the fence moved, does the gate appear to be straight and easy to open? You want to make sure you understand the craftsmanship that your contractor is offering you. The second question is if they can produce a copy of their certificate of insurance. Now, it's pretty common. Any contractor that carries insurance can get with their insurance agent and have the agent send you a certificate of insurance covering that contractor. Now, it's not just enough to have liability and automobile insurance. While these are important, you want to make sure specifically that it includes workman's compensation insurance. That is, if one of this company's employees gets hurt on your property, are they going to come to you to try to cover the medical expenses, or is there this workman's compensation insurance in place to take care of this employee, again, should they get hurt while installing your fence? The third question, and this is one to get in writing, would be a timeline or a proposed timeline of the fence project. When is the fence going to be started? I'm not talking about the month of June. I'm talking about we're looking at installing the second week in June. Also, how long is a project going to take? Is it a 2-day project? Are those 2 days on site, or is there a day on site, several days for the concrete to cure, another day on site for the project to finish, that sort of thing. And also, we understand that there are weather delays. I mean, in the spring, here in the Midwest, we get a lot of rain.
Rains a lot this time of year.
As a contractor, we account for that. But when I'm putting this in writing, I would likely say I don't mind telling you it'll be the second Monday in June, weather depending. That could change by 2 or 3 days. The point is, understand the timeline and have that timeline in writing with an understanding that it can be flexible, but at least it lets you know realistically when this fence is going to be installed. The fourth question is probably the biggest question, and that's about money. And money can be broken down into a couple sub-questions. 1, how does this contractor expect to be paid? Do they only accept cash or check? Do they also accept credit cards or debit cards? Do they offer financing, which could be a good option depending on your project? But be sure to be very clear exactly how the contractor wants to be paid, and also be very clear that you'll be requiring a receipt for that payment, especially if it's in cash. I would add a caveat here, probably also, that I would avoid paying in cash at all costs. It's not going to save you anything over paying with a check, and at least with a check, you have a paper trail, a canceled deposited check, should the project turn south, that you can turn to prove that this contractor was paid this money. The second sub-question of the question of money is payment schedule. Is there a deposit required up front, which is fairly typical? Depending on your state, typically contractors will ask for 50% down, the balance upon completion, or on larger projects, on longer projects, there might be a payment schedule, meaning half down upon signing of the contract and then a payment draw at certain milestones, when the materials are delivered, when the posts are set, when the fence is completed, or based on inspections. If it's a larger project that requires inspections, those might be payment points. Be very clear, and again, have it in writing what the payment schedule is so that you aren't taken by surprise when you get a bill before the job is done. Now, I'll say again that the most common payment schedule in the industry for residential projects is going to be half down at contract signing and then the balance at completion. Typically, we do a net 15 after completion, so 15 days after the last day on the job, the payment comes due. That gives the homeowner the ability to open a few gates, to walk around the fence, make sure they love it before the payment comes due. The final sub-question of question number 4, all about money, is, are there any additional costs? Specifically, are there rock charges? At least here in the Midwest, that's something we see as contractors will come in with a significantly lower upfront cost, but with an additional cost for hitting rock. Some of the contractors in our area charge $100 per hole that they hit rock in, which is a little disingenuous. At least here in Southwest Missouri, you can't dig a hole without finding some sort of rock. At $100 a hole, these rock clauses could add up significantly. You could end up paying that contractor more than you would have paid a contractor that didn't have a rock clause. So, as we're closing out question 4, all about money, make sure you know exactly what all the primary costs are and any applicable additional charges. For question number 5, are the individuals that are building the fence on your property going to be employees of the company or subcontractors of that company? Again, not saying one is any worse or better than the other, but it would give you some peace of mind knowing, are the people working on my project directly employed by the company? Gives the company a little bit greater control over timelines, over who's actually going to be on your job. It also ties in with insurance. Subcontractors quite often are responsible for their own insurance, and the companies employing those contractors are responsible for making sure that insurance stays in force during the whole year. Unfortunately, what can happen, the contractor could let that insurance lapse, which again could wind up with someone being hurt on your property while installing your fence and end up coming back to you to have their medical expenses covered. Again, with a company that has their own workman's comp insurance policy, who then sends their employees to your job or to your yard, if that employee does get hurt on your property, the company has a plan in place for handling those medical expenses. And finally, kind of a bonus question for sticking around to the end is going to be permits. Who handles the permits? This varies a lot contractor to contractor. Some contractors handle all of the permits. Other contractors don't handle any permits. Some contractors in the middle will handle some of the ones in some cities, but not in others, depending on how rigorous the application process. Sometimes municipalities want the homeowner to apply for the permit process for whatever reason. In the end, just be very clear exactly who's responsible for pulling the permit, or if you are, can the contractor at least help guide you through the permitting process? It's typically pretty straightforward. In our area, they're typically no cost or like a low cost $25 permit. Do yourself a favor, just make sure you understand who's responsible for the permit, who's paying for the permits, what the permitting process is like. The main reason for this is if your fence does not have a permit, it very likely could get stopped mid-installation until that contractor can go and obtain the permit from the city office. It's not usually something that happens very quickly. You could end up with a project left in limbo until that permit gets pulled. So again, do yourself a favor, make sure you know exactly who's responsible for pulling that permit. All right, guys, if your contractor can answer each 6 of these questions to your satisfaction, I think you're well on your way to understanding the contractors that are serious and have a good process together and the ones that might be winging it. If you have any additional questions, I'd love to hear them. Drop them in the comments below. Until next time, Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors, and I'll see you next time.